The red wave, whom many right-wing pundits had predicted would happen in the midterm cycle, did not materialize last night. Many Trump-backed candidates faced some losses. Now, some of the big ones is the loss of pee-drinking puppy killer Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. He got blown out by populist John Fetterman. Fetterman, of course, has been recovering from a stroke and still, obviously, and this is great news, crushed Dr. Oz. Awesome. Doug Mastriano also lost the gubernatorial race to Democrat Josh Shapiro. Tudor Dixon in Michigan got crushed by Big Gretch, which is great. In Arizona, Blake Masters has lost. Kerry Lake still too close to call. So that means Mark Kelly holds on. And then in New York, you have Lee Zeldin's race for governor. Didn't quite work out. In Congress, Zeldin was a staunch Trump defender who voted to overturn the 2020 election and had called Trump's impeachment a, quote, charade and clown show. So you're going to notice there's a little bit of a pattern with the people who lost versus the people who won. And again, there were Republican wins. In fact, Republicans are very likely going to pick up the House by a couple of seats, and that is going to be significant. And still, you can definitely say that for Republicans is a win. All right. But let's go to more losses here. First, J.R. Majewski's campaign for an Ohio House seat landed flat on its face. Remember, that's the guy who made the Let's Go Brandon rap and had carved Trump into his farmland. He was also on January 6th, by the way. Sad. Baby. But not only did MAGA, like I said, have a bad night, you also had a lot of good ballot measures that won. And I think that's far more important than just rubbing it into the right wing. For example, in Michigan, Proposal 3, protecting reproductive freedom, that won. So it overturned the 1930s law that banned abortion. Not only that, but there were also two propositions, one that expanded early voting drop boxes, and another one that actually did financial disclosure rules and term limits for members of the state Congress. Democrats also, by the way, in Michigan, picked up a seat from a former Republican that had impeached Trump. That Republican was removed in a primary, and, well, they ran an election denier and lost. Voters in South Dakota approved a constitutional amendment that would extend Medicaid eligibility under the ACA. It's good. Arizona passed a measure requiring entities making independent campaign expenditures of at least $50,000 in statewide campaigns or $25,000 in other campaigns to disclose the original source of money for contributions over $5,000. So there's a little bit of transparency when it comes to money in politics. Those are rare wins. I'll take them. Connecticut also legalized early voting. DC voters approved an increase in the minimum wage, the tipped minimum wage, until it equals the wage for non-tipped employees in 2027. Nebraska also raised their minimum wage to $15, which would be enacted by 2027. Again, these are wins. I'll take them. We need as many wins as we can get. Louisiana, which, again, I'm surprised about this one, will allow local governments to waive water charges for customers when water infrastructure is damaged and it's not the customer's fault. Look, there's these, states, Louisiana, Alabama, that are having issues with water. So I think that's good. It's a good ballot measure. Maryland legalized marijuana, Missouri as well. Massachusetts is still looking at instituting a wealth tax on millionaires, but so far the votes are not in it yet. But it seems to be doing quite well. Montana voted to protect electronic data and communications from unreasonable search and seizure and requires a search warrant to access them. That's privacy. It's very important. And I would like to see actually something like that on the federal level to protect people's privacy. Because right now, again, Facebook, Twitter, Elon Musk, right? They can go and take your data and give it to law enforcement. These private conversations, just stand them over the cops. Ridiculous. So Montana, well done on that one. New Mexico, they voted to increase spending on education using state oil and gas revenue. So that's good. Education, good. Oregon and Tennessee banned slavery. I know, from criminal punishment. It's amazing that in 2022, we're like, yeah, you banned slavery. But wait, hold on. Remember, the criminal justice system currently is able to use indentured labor. And so Oregon and Tennessee banning that's actually a significant step in criminal justice reform, making sure that we don't, have these corporations that can go in and exploit labor, much like Herschel Walker's company was able to exploit prison labor. That said, as for the House and Senate, getting back to the national elections here, Republicans, again, we're still waiting on the results of the Senate, but it's incredibly close. There are 3 seats that are still up for grabs, that are waiting for the votes to come in. But the House, as I mentioned before, very likely to go to Republicans by just a couple of seats. So they're not going to really be able to do a whole lot. And so it could be worse. Let's just say that. Now, let's get to some of the things that Republicans had won. J.D. Vance beat Tim Ryan in Ohio. Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock are actually going to a runoff because it was so close. And so that happens on December 6th. Ted Budd won in North Carolina and in Florida. Let's talk about Florida. Cementing themselves as the dick of the United States. Okay.
Testicles. Tallywhacker.
Well, they had a massive red wave. If there was a red wave, it was in Florida. So now, that said, DeSantis easily crushed Charlie Crist, who was a former Republican. And so, look, that's one of the main things that had happened. And the thing about that, when it comes to MAGA, is, well, MAGA's they're looking at DeSantis right now. They're eyeing him, and they're saying, is that the future? Maybe. As far as Trump is concerned, he's got a lot to worry about. Look, Trump is not a fan of DeSantis. I talked about how their feud had sort of reunited as Trump called him Ron DeSanctimonious. Again, not the best word. But there's a good chance that Donald Trump did not write that because it's too many words. It's too many syllables. Too big of a word. And just not clever. Not clever at all. That said, look, there's also questions about whether or not Ron DeSantis was thinking about running in the 2024 election for president. Those talks are being renewed. And then, did Rubio and Gates get reelected? Asked Don Rose. Yes, that was the other thing. Rubio beat Val Demings by quite a significant margin. And of course, Gates had also won. And so, like I said, you had a red wave. It just only happened in Florida. So, that said, for Trump's picks, and I think this is the interesting political, situation that we have now in the Republican Party, is Trump's picks either never had a chance of losing by running unopposed, because we did see that, but in other races, we saw that they lost. In fact, in a lot of cases, they lost in the general election. So, again, unless they were running in a very, very red district, like, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene winning. But she was in a district that is plus 31 for Trump. And so that it wasn't exactly a surprise to see, people like Marjorie Greene. But what is interesting is Lauren Boebert, who is trailing And it is an incredibly close race there, but we could be saying bye-bye Boebert. Maybe. So now, I talk about the right-wing schism. Here it is. Eric Erickson, longtime GOP commentator, said this about what he described as a disappointing showing for Trump. Quote, they weren't good candidates. They had more allegiance to him than anything else. The GOP might still win both chambers, but this is not the night they expected. Ben Shapiro tweeted this. From red wave to red wedding. Oh, damn. Look, anybody who's watched Game of Thrones, you know that reference. Yikes. In another Twitter thread, he writes this, quote, Republicans wildly underperformed and heads should roll. There's a lot of hope for the Republican coalition given their performance with Hispanic and black voters, which, of course, when you look at the breakdown of black voters, they actually way overwhelmingly voted for Democrats. White people, however, still went more for Republicans, especially older people, whereas younger Americans went overwhelmingly progressive. That said, back to Shapiro. Quote, their candidate quality was poor and their leadership was either absent or counterproductive. Candidate quality matters. Underlying dynamics are not strong enough to drive bad candidates to victory. Donald Trump was a major drag on Republicans from his picks to his antics. And look, there's going to be a conversation going forward a lot about candidate quality. Which, by the way, I thought that we were actually going to have this conversation on the left. But no, it turns out we had some pretty good progressive wins. Fetterman, Summer Lee, etc. And so I was expecting a lot of mainstream news outlets to be, printing articles like Democrats were rejected in the midterms because of their too far left policies. Biden went too far to the left. And that's why you had an incredible shellacking, as Obama would call it, or as he did call it. But no, they get to put away those sanctimonious articles because it turns out it was way better than we expected it to be. But back to Shapiro. Trump picked bad candidates, spent almost no money in his hand-picked candidates, and then proceeded to crap on the Republicans who lost. He's referring, of course, to Don Bolduc, who lost and didn't sufficiently bend the knee. This will have 2024 impact. The Republican leadership class, paralyzed by the Trump phenomenon, failed to provide any leadership at all. And then this is where, again, this gets to why they're eyeing DeSantis. Quote, except for DeSantis, who was a leader, an excellent candidate, and an organizer of his own party, leading to a Florida red tsunami. So there's Ben Shapiro jumping on off the Trump train, which, look, I think that he was only on it because he saw where the rest of the party was. One of the original things that Ben Shapiro had said, and this was all the way back in like 2015, 2016, right? Remember, he called Donald Trump's campaign,
it's like a Sharknado, except with poop.
He was not a fan of Donald Trump. So now, here comes DeSantis, at least in the Republican Party. And so you've got a lot of people now, a lot of influencers that are suddenly really starting to make some nice googly eyes at DeSantis once again as a possible leader of the party. So that should be very interesting. The schism is real. So let me get to one more thing here. This is from Cernovich, right-winger. Trump's chosen candidates were on ballot. Tonight was a complete repudiation of him and his obsession with the stolen election talking point. Oh, interesting. which DeSantis and Kemp didn't push. Kemp was another winner, beating out Stacey Abrams. And of course, that's an incredible loss in Georgia. That one hurts. But Kemp was not an election denier, very famously. And again, DeSantis didn't really talk about it. Cernovich continued by saying 2020 was close. So there was an argument for Trump 2024. Tonight wasn't. There's no debate now. Again, this Civil War is going to be really, really fun to watch, but can't really get complacent. Yes, you can enjoy it. You can eat the popcorn and have a little fun watching Republicans tear each other apart, but we also have to be proactive as well. Okay? Yes. Did we stave off the red wave? We did. For the most part. Doesn't mean there won't be another attempt. It doesn't mean that they can't be successful in the next election. So, after the celebration is done, you try to, plan for the future. I would say that Biden, and some of you had some great suggestions in the chat here, focus on economic issues. Democrats started to focus on economic issues late in the game. And luckily, again, abortion was one of the top issues. So, but talk about economic issues. Bernie Sanders has been stressing that we continue to talk about economic issues, bringing down the price of things like food and fuel. Talk about that stuff and actually do something about it. Rein in these corporations that are price gouging us. That's something that, again, we need to do. So, like I said, yes, we can have fun watching the Republicans tear each other apart, Republican on Republican crime, but let's also prepare for the future because there are other elections and we can't get complacent.